we'll leave Nandita a moment to take away our presentation. Thank you again for being here tonight. For those of you who do not know, this is our first day of exhibition and our inaugural series of programs, so we're very happy to have you here. I'll invite everybody, thank you, Jean-Marc, everybody who's meant to be with me on this talk to come my way, come. And then we are missing, we're just going to sit around, I think, the space, Sandra, and we're missing one, Simón. And there we go. So we're going to get started right away. Unfortunately, we have only 1 hour. As we were saying, this is the very first series of artist talks, and at the entrance in the front, in the wall, right at the beginning of the exhibition, you will find the whole series of public programs. We'll run public programs every week, Wednesday through Sunday, and whereas the majority of them will revolve around specific themes that resonate with the exhibition. Every Thursday night we will host artist talks with artists from the exhibition. Once again, I remind everybody, or for those who came in a little bit later after Nandita's talk started, that this is the first day of Cosmopolis 2 Rethinking the Human, which is curated by Catherine Weir, the chief curator and director of the platform, and then Zain Halou, Charlene Dinut, and myself as associate curators of the project. So we're very lucky because being the inaugural week of the exhibition, we have the chance to talk with a lot of artists that travel specifically for the vernissage. And so tonight we have a little bit of a focus on artists that joined us and that work and live in Central and South America. So first of all, I want to introduce everybody that is sitting here with me. First and foremost, Christina, Toulouse, Montenegro, who's been an incredible collaborator of Cosmopolis and with us for Pompidou. She runs an organization which is called ACA, which is the Association Centraméricaine, and she's been really an invaluable help for many of the installations, for the exhibition of Simón Vega's central space, for Benvenuto, the project that Benvenuto has been undertaking since he arrived in Paris. So thank you, Christina, for your help. If you just want to say one word about ACA, and then we can move on to presenting the artist.
Okay, thank you very much, Ilaria. Thank you so much also, Catherine, for the opportunity. And I want to speak for me, but for all Central American cultural scene, which is almost always absent from the centers of art. And I'm so happy and proud that so good talents are presented here. Simón, Sandra, Benvenuto are really good representatives of the dynamics of the Central American scene. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. And then we will move on to introduce everybody else here. So with us is Benvenuto Chavajay, who's an artist from Guatemala, and you will be able to see his installation at the very beginning of the exhibition, the series of
microphones, titled John Cage, 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Sandra Monterroso, another marvelous artist from Guatemala, who's presenting 2 works, a sculptural piece titled Columna Vertebral, right at the entrance with the beautiful red textile. And again, we will be talking about this in a moment, and also a sound piece right next to the sculpture. And then we have Adrián Balseca, who joins us from Ecuador, who is presenting a video piece in the video space. For those of you who might have not had the chance to walk around the whole exhibition, I also invite you later to come and spend some time in the Espace Video. We're presenting a series of 10 very interesting videos. Adriana Bustos from Argentina, who is the author of the mural piece that we see right here with the history of overlooked women, and we will talk about that in a second. And Simón Vega from El Salvador, who is the author of the central space, convivial space, and workshop space that you can see here, and that we will be activating with a series of reading groups every Friday and with a whole other series of events throughout. So again, I encourage you to look at our calendar programs at the entrance or on the website. I will leave it to Benvenuto first to begin. I will do some translation from English to from Spanish to English for him. So we can maybe use this, and maybe you can, Adriana, can you help us to just go through forward his PowerPoint, because we're very far. So Benvenuto, Adriana te va a ayudar, vamos a como, ¿sí? Si le das como una pequeña señal, vamos a empezar. So we're going to get started with Benvenuto's talk.
Bueno, muchas gracias por la invitación. La verdad es que tenemos poco tiempo, entonces tal vez voy a abordar un poco sobre mis inquietudes sobre el arte, ¿verdad?
Okay, so thank you all for being here with me. So we know that we have a very little time to talk, so I will just start right away talking about what are my concerns or my doubts, or when thinking about contemporary art and artistic practices.
Sí, me gustaría hablar en Sotujil, pues mi idioma materna, o el quiché, que es lo que se habla en Guatemala, pero aquí nadie habla, ¿verdad?
That he would really prefer to, rather than speak Spanish, speak his real native language, which is Tutuchil, one of the indigenous languages of Guatemala, but unfortunately nobody here is able to understand that or translate that for him. Surely, unfortunately, I am not.
Pues digo esto porque pues todas mis inquietudes vienen desde el pensamiento indígena maya, ¿verdad? O sea, lo que yo hago es una traducción a través de lo que llamas contemporáneo.
So he says this because really everything that he does, all his practice really revolves around sort of a process of translation of what the ideas and knowledges and forms of thinking of his indigenous culture are, and sort of translating that in relation to what we define as contemporary somewhat.
Pues en estos idiomas, hay 23 idiomas mayas, no existe la palabra arte, y no sé por qué estoy aquí.
So across the 23 Maya languages that exist, there's no word that translates directly into art. So he really doesn't know why he's here.
Lo que existe son unas traducciones y unas similitudes de lo que se refiere a la palabra sagrada.
So all we have to use in this sense is some sort of synonyms or similarities that all refer to one word, which is that of something that is sacred, something sacred.
En el pensamiento maya, todo tiene alma y todo tiene un porqué. El tiempo y espacio tiene su alma.
So in the Maya form of thinking, Maya philosophy, Maya understanding of the world, everything has a soul, everything has a reason, and so also time and space have themselves a soul.
Sí, por eso yo desde aquí vengo a Descartes.
Yes, so that's why he comes here to Descartes, so the philosopher, yes?
Sí, o sea, descarto.
Yes, he discards it.
Y pongo adorno al adorno, a teoría del adorno.
And he uses adorno as an adornment.
Y a Hegel lo pongo Hegel. Entonces es una forma y una manera como desde el pensamiento indígena maya hemos construido desde el lugar donde estamos parados. O sea, eso es un lugar donde nosotros queremos hacer ese lugar. Después pongo el lugar del ombligo.
So that all this practice and sort of this indigenous thinking departs and acts from its own place. And this place is what he usually refers to as the belly button.
Bueno, por favor. Bueno, pues no miro mucho, pero pues es una esquema, digamos la esquema que yo uso a mis inquietudes, eso no es arte, pero son los esquemas de mis inquietudes, vengo de una filosofía transmoderna.
So this is somewhat a graphic visualization of his concerns, and he, when thinking about this, he really refers to transmodern philosophy.
Sí, digamos, la modernidad, el colonialismo, todos los que nos ha afectado. O sea, tenemos una herencia que nosotros que tenemos perenne en la tierra y en el cuerpo.
So, for instance, modernity and the colonial legacy, the colonial heritage, all of this forms a sort of heritage that they have in the body and in the land.
Sí, desde el pensamiento occidental moderna nos han exteriorizado.
So that is somewhat that through Western thinking, they have been somewhat what he calls exteriorized, if I were to translate literally, but we'll get to what it means in a second.
De esa forma como yo descarto a los filósofos, pero me interesa más el filósofo Walter Benjamin.
So he sort of dismisses all philosophers, but he's indeed very much interested in Walter Benjamin.
Walter Benjamin sobre el sujeto de la historia.
And mostly when Benjamin talks about the subject of history.
Y el sujeto de la historia es para mí, o sea, digamos, desde el lugar donde nosotros lo tenemos escondido en nuestro ombligo, es como atravesar la modernidad con sus componentes.
So the subject of history, from his standpoint, from where he's coming from this sort of element of indigeneity, is this way of traversing somewhat all the components of modernity.
O sea, desde la modernidad nos afecta, pero eso está, digamos, o sea, el mundo del pensamiento maya, la India, la China. Entonces, eso nosotros tenemos una interculturalidad, tenemos una pluriuniversalidad y la herencia afectada, ¿verdad?
So he's saying how they have this interculturality and pluriversality, and also this sort of legacy that has been affecting them.
Sí, entonces la herencia afectada que está en nuestro cuerpo, en nuestros territorios, entonces ahí es donde se esconde el ombligo. O sea, nosotros tenemos un ombligo, digamos, desde el pensamiento maya, el ombligo enterrado, ombligo desplazado, el ombligo negado y el ombligo ausente.
So this legacy, this heritage somewhat relates to what he refers to as the belly button, sort of this element of centrality, which can be either buried, enterrado, desplazado, so somewhat displaced, denied, negado, or ausente, so completely absent.
Entonces, yo como indígena maya tengo mi ombligo enterrado, lo sé y lo sé dónde está escondido, entonces desde ahí empiezo a hablar.
So, as an indigenous Maya person, he knows that his belly button is buried and that it's hidden, but he knows where it is. And that is the departing point, the departure point from which he develops his whole discourse.
Entonces cada uno sabe dónde está su ombligo, desplazado, está allá, acá, allá, no sé. Pues cada uno tiene que hablar en el lugar donde tiene que hablar. Por eso nosotros, yo por ejemplo, yo vengo de ese ombligo, digamos, el ombligo que es el sujeto de la historia.
So each one of us needs to know where our belly button is, whether it's buried or displaced, and so on and so forth. And as far as this is concerned, his belly button is really relating to this idea of the subject of history.
Y mis inquietudes del arte es de lo que a mí me sirve la modernidad y de lo que me funciona la ancestralidad, lo fusiono y lo llevo más allá a una filosofía transmoderna. Es más allá de la modernidad.
So he somewhat uses what modernity has to give, and at the same time he employs this ancestral knowledge to go beyond and to put into place this sort of a transmodern approach.
Bueno, voy a mostrar unas imágenes.
So we're going to show some images.
Es un anuncio que fui a dejar en los medios de comunicación. Yo mismo fui a dejar y yo dije que yo estaba desaparecido y me hicieron caso, sacaron digamos, ¿cómo se llama? El anuncio en la televisión de Guatemala y en la prensa de Guatemala que yo estaba desaparecido, pero eso que como siempre nos quitan en la historia, los desaparecidos desde hace 500 años, no solo los desaparecidos de 500 años, también, o sea, los desaparecidos del conflicto armado. Entonces, el desaparecernos en la historia con la lógica occidental. 2002.
So in 2002, he's showing us some images in some of his early works. In 2002, he sent this announcement. You see his picture there through TVs and media and newspapers in Guatemala, himself announcing that he had disappeared. And this is something that really had resonance. It was spread throughout the news and the magazines. And it is an action that he undertook because of sort of the invisibility or the disappearing of indigenous people for across 500 years of colonialism, but also during the armed conflict in Guatemala. And it is somewhat his way of kind of putting this conversation back on the table.
Y yo trabajo mucho en silencio. Yo lo que hago es traducir el silencio a través de las cosas del arte y también la ausencia. Me importa mucho la ausencia, por eso los desaparecidos los tienen en ausencia. Pero esto permíteme, sí, esto antes que se me da la idea, en mi pueblo, que es un pueblo, es del lago de Atitlán, en el mismo momento mi desaparición, desapareció también un francés encima de las montañas. Y el problema, no me buscaron a mí, fueron a buscar al francés.
Okay, so this work is part of an interest that he has in translating silence and absence. And as an addition to the story, he says that at the same time as this was published, there was a French, I assume, tourist that disappeared in the mountains near where Benvenuto is from, the Lake Atitlan. And the police, the authorities went to look for the French foreigner, but they did not go and look for Benvenuto.
Bueno, hay mucho que hablar, pero por favor. Bueno, en mi idioma no existe la palabra el arte, entonces lo que yo hago es una traducción. Mi padre no pudieron leer y escribir. Se supone que mis padres y mis ancestros fueron analfabetos. Bueno, analfabetos a fuente de qué. Entonces ellos tuvieron una manera y una manera de ver la realidad distinta a la occidental. Entonces yo no puedo hacer eso lo mismo. Lo que yo hago simplemente es traducir y poner un microscopio a la piedra para escuchar el alma. No necesito pegar a la piedra para sacar ojos ni nariz. Necesito escuchar el alma de la piedra.
So, as he said before, there's no word for art in Sutuchin, in his Maya native language. So what he does is somewhat a continuous effort, a continuous exercise and act of translating that. And his father, his mother, so his ancestors were not able to write or read, and therefore they were considered somewhat ignorant according to a Western standard. And of course, this is absolutely debatable in his view, and that is why he wants to do this act of translating, to somewhat present this other way of seeing reality that his ancestors had. And in the same way, because of this issue with the word of art and this idea of art, he doesn't see the necessity of sculpting
taking anything away from the stone, because the stone and the stones have a soul. So what he's interested in doing, and this is another work by Benvenuto, of course, is the possibility and the idea of listening to the soul of the stone.
Sí, esa es una manera de desempolvar la historia y activar la memoria.
So this is a way for him to take away the dust from memory, ancestral memory, and reactivate history.
Esta es la primera imagen que yo vi a través de mi madre. Y esto es una práctica que tenemos los indígenas, que la tortilla apachada con sal nos daban cuando teníamos hambre o sed y llorábamos. Entonces eso nos quitaba las lágrimas. Entonces esto se llama yo es la primera imagen que yo vi. Entonces yo me alejo de los pensamientos occidentales, pero me acerco más a lo más importante para mí, a mi ancestralidad.
So this is one of the first images that he remembers as a kid from his mother, from being with his mother, which is a tortilla that is kind of shrunk a little bit, and with salt it's given to kids when they're crying to kind of, it's like a pacifier of some sort. And so it's one of the first images, and is, you see here the title of the work is also the name of the tortilla. And it is a way for him to somewhat get away from Western ideas and Western perspectives and come closer to this ancestral knowledge that he has.
Sí, pues en esa parte, digamos, en otra imagen, es la misma tortilla bañada en oro. O sea, hay muchos que dicen, ¿y por qué el oro? El oro es el que nos han robado desde acá para allá.
And here you see it also kind of coated in gold. And people ask him why the gold? Because that's what they stole from them.
Sí. Esta es una imagen muy fuerte, es que digamos que la historia está lastimada desde los pueblos indígenas. Esto es un tatuaje que yo hice, es de alguien que ganó un maratón en Estados Unidos, y el gringo no pudo pronunciar su nombre. Él se llama Doroteo Bamuch, pero él lo simplificó por Mateo Flores. Y Mateo Flores se quedó digamos, durante 60 años con un estadio nacional de Guatemala, se quedó con Mateo Flores y no Doroteo Bamuch. Con esta idea de tatuarme y proponer a las autoridades de turno de Guatemala de cambiar el nombre del estadio, y sí se cambió el nombre del estadio hace 3 años.
So this is one image of a work that he developed across a whole series of years that relates to this piece of history of Guatemala, for which in 1952 the winner of the Boston Marathon was an indigenous man from Guatemala, Doroteo Bamuch, who then was reported in the newspaper, in the press, under a different and simplified name, which was, of course, not his own, Mateo Flores. But that's how he went down in history. And the National Stadium of Guatemala was named after Mateo Flores rather than Doroteo Bamuch. So this is part of a process that Benvenuto triggered, for which he tattooed on himself the identity card of the man. And then he also started a whole process to ask Parliament in Guatemala to change the name of the stadium from Mateo Flores to Doroteo Bamuch, which is something that happened 3 years ago in 2016.
También me tatué mi apellido, Chavajay. Chavajay significa lodo y casa, y mis ancestros son los constructores de casa. Entonces, tener mi apellido aquí enfrente, estoy confirmando que el pasado nosotros lo tenemos adelante. El pasado lo tenemos adelante porque estamos desempolvando la historia y activando la memoria aquí y ahora.
So this is another work that he did, for which he tattooed on his chest his last name, which literally translated means mud and house, so house of mud. And this relates to his ancestors who were constructors, so they were house builders somewhat. And it is part of this series of actions for which he wanted to have this element on his chest, somewhat because he thinks that the past is something that indigenous people have in front of them, ahead of them, and not behind them. And it is another way for him to somewhat take the dust away from history and reactivate the memory of indigenous people.
También mi apellido, mi segundo apellido, que de mi madre es González, también fue impuesto, también cambié mi apellido González porque González no era el apellido, era Ixtetelá. Lo que yo hice es dibujar Ixtetelá y mi mamá, que no sabía leer y escribir, entonces empezó a marcar hasta que llegó a 48 hojas, y las 48 hojas me...
So again, relating to the element of indigenous name, indigenous language, this is another work, is a tattoo, again, on himself. One of his, the second last name that he has originally was Gonzalez, another name that was imposed by the colonial history of Guatemala. His original last name was instead Ixtetela, which is an indigenous name that he wrote, he jotted down on a piece of paper for his mother, who cannot read or write, to copy, somewhat to reappropriate. And he asked her to reproduce this 48 times, to the point in which this came some sort of, not abstract, but somewhat very far away. So somewhat kind of almost an abstraction.
Ni por el tiempo no se puede exponer tanto. Entonces solo faltan dos imágenes. Eso es el hombre del lodo. En la cosmovisión maya existen tres hombres creados por los dioses de Pompidou: el hombre del lodo, el hombre de maíz y el hombre de madera. Este es el hombre del lodo, que fue en Cuenca, y el hombre de maíz, que fue el 19 de octubre, fue aquí en el cementerio, que fue un homenaje a Miguel Ángel Asturias. Después hablamos de la historia de Miguel Ángel Asturias. Así fue. Sí, otro.
So the two works that we just saw relate again to the cosmovision, so the understanding and vision of the cosmos, of life and the universe and history of indigenous people, and relates to sort of this tale of their origin, for which the gods created three types of men: one made of mud, one made of corn, and one made of wood. So Benvenuto has started a series of performances through which he embodies these three elements. And so the previous image that we saw, one back, Adriana, before? Voila, yes. So this is a performance that Benvenuto presented last year in the Cuenca Biennial in Ecuador, again covered in mud, walking through the streets of the city. And these other images are really from a performance, again covered in sort of corn paste. That is a performance that he presented last Saturday, October 19, in front of the cemetery of Père Lachaise here in Paris. So it's part of an ongoing series.
Sí, por favor. La niña, la pinta y la Santa María, creo que estamos.
So this is the Niña Pinta en Santa María, so again, relating to colonial history.
Sí. Bueno, el descubrimiento de Cristóbal Colón en América, si ustedes dan cuenta, digamos, Colón con su imagen, así con el maíz, lo más importante y lo más sagrado, estamos encubriendo a Colón en América.
So this is another image that he created, really to think about how this image on the profile of Christopher Columbus can be somewhat covered by these other natural elements and these symbols that relate strongly to the culture and identity of indigenous people of the Americas.
O sea, desde acá, como sujeto de la historia está cambiando y la historia se debe de sanar. Por favor.
So as thinking about the subject of history, from this point of view, from his point of view, he feels that history is changing and that history has to undergo a process of healing.
Sí, la Mona Lisa está enferma, flaca, seca y malherida.
Okay, so he says the Mona Lisa is sick, too thin, definitely too thin, and also malnourished, like
Anorexia cultural.
kind of as a symbol of cultural anorexia.
Es que tuve que resumir esto, los 433 de John Cage,
Yeah.
y tuve que resumir los 500 años que a nosotros nos toca hablar.
So this is a way for him to present to you sort of a summary of all the thoughts and underpinnings that are at the core of the work that he's presenting, the John Cage 4 minutes and 33, and this sort of 500 years of colonial history that Guatemala has.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias a usted. we're going to continue with Sandra, who has Java. Thank you. As we were saying, Sandra is presenting a sculpture, Columna Vertebral Roja, and a sound piece, and she will guide us a little bit through the process of her work, because this is a project, Sandra, correct me if I'm wrong, that took a few years of, it's been a few years in the making and a lot of research. So we'll go a little bit through the few key steps of this process. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, all of you, for being here with us and to listen to us what we have to say. Yeah, I will just talk about the process of this spinal column that it's the one that you can see behind you at the entrance, the red one, which is made of textile, and it's work that I started to make in 2012. And but it's related also to my home history, of course. I didn't, as a difference from Benvenuto, I didn't born in the village. I was born in the city. And when I was 17 years old, I realized that I had indigenous background because my grandmother died. When she was dying, she was speaking to me in her Mayan language, in Maya Quechua. And that was, for me, that was very impressive. And I asked my mother, and my aunts and my family, tell me what she's saying to me. And she was dying and lying in bed, and my aunt says, she said that she needs water, so give her water. So I gave her a spoon with water because she couldn't move. So she was speaking in her language, and then I started to, well, I thought maybe we can I started to, thank you, she's not my grandmother, but she's my, ¿cómo se dice? Mi abuela. Aunt grandmother, and yeah, and but my grandmother looked more or less like her, because unfortunately we don't have many pictures of her. But when I realized that I had this indigenous background, I began to try to figure it out, which was the message of my grandmother, actually. And after some years, I realized that her message was for me to go back and research, my own history as an indigenous woman as well. So I started to go to make some, theoretical research about the Mayan culture, but not just that, because this implication has also a relationship to me and my mother, because my mother was ashamed of being indigenous, for example, and also was ashamed because of my grandmother never got married, for example, and because she was like living as a housemaid in the house of a finquero. I don't know, this guy who has a lot of lands in the north of Guatemala, where the Verapaces are. And the Quechua community is in the north of Guatemala. So it's like the third of these 23 indigenous groups of Mayan culture, is like the third more bigger in the country. And it has like this third type of colonization that we have from the Germans, because of the coffee. So my grandmother used to work in that territory as a housemaid until she was put her away, and she has to go to the city to find a way of living. So you can move. So this you can find these pictures in a blog that I have. Actually, it's called Columna Vertebral. It's online, and it's all the process there are all the photographs that I took when I started to travel to the community with my mother and my son. And it's for me, it's also a process of healing, because I think to get a knowledge of my own background and my own culture as a heritage, as a Maya Quechua woman, I could start to heal different types of ways of racism in Guatemala that is still alive, that are related also with the denying of our own culture. So these are pictures of me, the little there, please, from the villages. This is San Juan Chamelco, Altar de la Paz. It's the town with my grandmother is not from there. It's near there. Her ombligo is there. But it's not there. It's a smaller village near this little town in the north of Guatemala. And the dress that you saw there, the indigenous woman that you saw there, this is the dress, this is the skirt that you saw there, is like the textile that the sculpture is made with. But the sculpture is made with this skirt rolled, and this is the way we kept in the closet the skirt for them to the skirt has to this shape. So you can. And well, I started to travel with my mother, and there's some pictures of the market and of the different houses of my family, because the project at the beginning was we traveled to the community and we stay at the houses of family and cousins or aunts, and I had to negotiate to borrow these skirts. And then they borrowed me like 15 or 20 skirts because I needed to collect 90 textiles to build this almost 3 meter sculpture. So it was a negotiation between me and them. Here you can find the looms, the workshop, with the textile workshop. Well, because my family also, my cousins, they are related to the textile production. They make the textiles and also they commercialize it. So these are the workshops, and these are all the place where they work to build and to create this pedal loom to make a textile. And the first project was made with this negotiation, borrow negotiation to build. You can go down. It took me like you can see there are more pictures of these moments when I am sharing with the community, and you can go and then I stopped there, and then I also, as part of the project, I took some portraits of them, and I asked them to come with me to a photograph studio, and I made portraits of all of them, of all of my family, in their traditional dress. And this is my process of research. This is not part of the exhibit. I haven't shown this work. It's just my archive, my own archive as an artist. and you can go down, and you can start it. So as you can see, this is the wig, like the blouse, and in the skirt is the in different types of colors. And was this color one. You can stop that, please. And this is like the first spinal column that I made in 2012. And after that, I also realized that I needed to expand the project. So this is a project that actually is not finished yet, because the project is to build 6 columns, and then we can. And this is the corner one is at the center, and then you can go down, and then these 2. This is the red one, that one that is here, built here. But in this picture, it was built in Brazil in a triennial 3 years ago, and you can see the yellow one that is also built and created. And the second part of the project is because I couldn't continue borrowing the skirts to my family, so I realized that I needed to create a commercial also, because of that, because also they are commercial women. They work with this textile commerce, I say. So I negotiate with them, but in a different way. And just gonna stop there. Stop there. I'm gonna read because and so this is like the concept of the for the columns that they're making, because they are based. I mean, it's not just the color because I like the colors. I like the colors, but each color it has a meaning. It has a symbolic way. So all the projects consist in it's a tribute to these directions that are not cardinal points, that are moving directions, because they are giving us a rhythm to walk and a rhythm to movement of the world. So these 4 directions is based on this yellow vertebral column, is a tribute to the origin of the wind. The red vertebral column will be, I mean, it is a tribute to the grandfather's song. This one that you are seeing here is made for the grandfather's song. And the black will be a tribute to the grandmother moon, and the white vertebral column will be a tribute to the rest of the wind. Sorry. And these columns are also about it's a kind of a monument or a totem, as you can see, but also it's an anti-monument because it's not made of. It's a very organic monument, as you can see, like Florence is made of built this stelas, for example, that you can find in these archaeological sites in Mayan culture, not just in Guatemala, but in Centraméricaine as well. So, well, this is the meaning of the project, and as I say at the beginning, for me, it's all this project that has to be with the meaning that I have of this decolonization process of really start healing and to return and recovery, as the talking way say in this book, this conversation, coming to return to our culture and our heritage, and also as anthropologists, Oracle may say, it is also a process of marginalization. That some of us as an indigenous person have to get into, to try to defend and try to recover and try to build this sort of empower of self-determination, not just for us, but this to also return our territories. Thank you. Thank you very much.
talk had been structured thinking around the sort of the specificities and histories of Guatemala, and then sort of expanding to also the rest of Central and South America, and the different ways of thinking about history, historical time, colonial history, present day iterations, and thinking about also the history of extractivism. So that's why we were thinking about this progression. So I leave it to you.
My name is Adrián Balseca. I'm an artist from Imperial. The project I'm going to be really briefly and talk really briefly about my project that I'm showing this night. I'm not going to show you all my portfolio. I'm going to really focus on Project for a Portrait. They introduce Project for a Portrait introduces fishes. And I guess it's a proyecto para retrato en origen de las especies introducidas. This is a really special commission that I released in 2016 for NARA, Latin American Rooming Art. That is a Latin American focus collection that's going on all around Latin America. So that year in 2016 is the first time that was released in Ecuador, in Galapagos Islands. So I am one of the artists from Ecuador that participated in the residency. As guest at that time, it was my third time in Galapagos Islands, and I visited some of them, different islands over there. But at that time, I visited Isabela Island and Santa Cruz Islands, that maybe are the most well-known islands. So I spent like 2 weeks with different artists from different countries. And really after that, the collection asked us to produce a really specific work related to the environmental situation, to the really specific environmental situation of the area Galapagos. So I didn't really know what to do, because I feel a little bit of responsibility as a Colorian to talk about this really fragile ecosystem. And I don't know, for the last 6 years I've been developing projects in very specific territories in Ecuador. Almost all of them in Amazon jungle, the frontier between what is now Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, and some of them in the highland areas. So this is really a good opportunity and good chance to present and produce a project talking about Galapagos, but I don't really have an idea what to do. So my first thoughts are really this idea of what it means like the presence of humans in the Galapagos Islands, what does it mean like the presence of these artists in the residency for these 2 weeks, and obviously the impact in the ecosystem of our presence over there. So obviously I'm thinking about Charles Darwin and this huge name of science related to the island. He got like there, I guess like at the middle of the 19th century, at the beginning, sorry. So I was really interested in the relationship between Charles Darwin and the Galapagos Islands, because he started producing some notes that are really the beginning of the tree of life idea, where it says like, I think, and it's like this sketch of the ramification of the humankind, that really after that became the idea of the evolution and where the humans begin. So I'm really thinking about this idea, what's the relationship of Charles Darwin, the island, the humans, and the humankind in relationship to those species on this really specific ecosystem. Now it's like a kind of a big tourism platform in Latin America. Really after Machu Picchu, I guess Galapagos is the most visited places in Ecuador, I mean in Latin America, and for sure the most visited place in Ecuador. So I became friend of, well, now he's my friend, he's an artist, a carpenter, that he most works now in kind of a replicas, of wooden replicas that you could see all over the islands. He's called Segundo Ruiz. He's originally from Azuay, that is a province in the highland zone, really more close to Peru, more or less. And I met him in Galapagos. He lives around 30 years over there. He got like 3 kids over there, 3 wives, and he really established over the islands working with these materials, with the woods. So it really surprised me, because the first time that I met him, I've been showing all these weekends, like all these animal replicas of tortoise, of sea lions, huge sculptures on wood. So maybe you don't know, but the Galapagos got like a really specific law. They live in a really specific regime because it's a national park now. So it's quite delicate, it's quite fragile. You can take like pictures with flash, you can touch any leaf, any animal for sure. So it's a really restrictive and really protected land. So it's a very dedicated ecosystem over there. So it's really surprising to see all these huge wooden sculptures. And I don't really understand how the sculptures could get to the island. So they told me that Segundo Toledo Ruiz are working with a very specific tree that is called Spanish cedar, Cedrela dorata, that was considered, but is a special law, like an introduced species. It's considered a kind of a plague, let's say, that is grows all around the island, that is a kind of a risky tree that destructs all the other ecosystem, the regional ones. So Pedro Segundo Ruiz found like this economic over there, working with this tree, and I commissioned him, like a kind of a commission inside another commission. So I commissioned him to build like a self-portrait made in wood. He hadn't made like a self-portrait of him all these years. And I say, okay, let's give you the funds of the commission to you. I'm gonna take some of the fund of the budget to produce like the video, and I asked him if it's possible to shoot a film about it. So we've been working like 2 weeks in the highland zone of Santa Cruz Island, really close to, yes. So this is some of the skills of the video you saw over there in the screening room. So it's really documentary things, I mean, really contemplative. There's no, I mean, it's audio, but it's not like a talk, or there's nobody talking over there. It's more like this relationship of Segundo Toledo Ruiz, like he's not local, he's not from Galapagos. His father is over there, he's probably like a family, entire family over there. But it's more like this idea of who is introduced, who is like local, and like this kind of instruction. What I'm trying to take in the film, like to shoot, is like to see this inscription of humans in the nature. So we work with this Spanish cedar, it's really antique, like at least 1800 years old, the tree, so it's really antique. But it's really crazy because you saw and really ornithologists working over Galapagos and the Darwin's Foundation told me like the birds couldn't recognize the tree woods over there and the leaves and the structure of the tree. So they didn't make the bird nest over there because the birds are not common to that kind of tree. Huh? So at the end we presented like for the first time in Contemporary Art Center in Quito, is like the video that you saw over there with a huge replica of himself, his portrait of Segundo Toledo Ruiz, that is the working collaboration. And I get this kind of collaborations with communities or specific craftsmen or different artists or engineers or different kind of scientists. It really depends on each project. Maybe project for a portrait is really the beginning of this kind of strategy to work with different communities. This is a project that I started this year that I've been working with a confined community, the indigenous community in the Amazon. Then they moved to another area, and we start like, I moved to live in a rubber plantation over there, and I am starting working in the construction of a motorbike based on a huge trunk of rubber that was discarded to construct to reforest the area. So this project was called Project for a Familiar Portrait, Cookie Grefa, or the surnames of his family. One of the pictures. And I present like the motorbike in the gallery. He's in Lima, Peru, this year. So today my practice is more focused in rubber extraction, rubber extractivism, and as well I work like a researcher, more focused on mining, creeper mines and mining extraction in Ecuador and what is going on around this destruction. This is another project that I presented last year in Bayana Los Cuenca with Benvenuto as well. It's a film and a wooden canoe as well that is called Phantom Recorder. This is a 60mm film that I produced in the Amazon jungle in Rio Bonanza River, that I work with an offshore fisherman that is not part of any community specifically, but their family lives over the river. And I shoot like the construction of a huge canoe that is not to transport people, and I work as in collaboration with Cara Solar. They are a group of engineers that build, they got like now like 2 canoes to transport people that work with solar energy. So I work together with them to build this canoe that use solar energy, but it's not to transport people, it's to record sound. So I make a lot of soundscape all over the river, really rough soundscapes with this grammar controlled canoe. So I really like to shoot like this kind of all the process behind the construction and the building of the canoe, but as well like the interaction of technologies and how these different kinds of technologies get together to this project. So obviously the project is like a kind of a quote to famous Fitzgerald film by Walter Herzog, but it's like a kind of an opposite sign that is not like, you know, this famous scene where you could see like Fitzgerald playing Ennio Caruso music in the middle of the jungle in the Amazon River. So like trying to give to the ancestors and to the jungle some culture from European culture. So this project is like to hear the jungle, it is not to say something to the jungle. So as well is a kind of a project that brings some knowledge that came from different parts, from like Asher fisherman that works with woods, with these engineers, Cara Solar, that came with all the technology to ensemble the solar panels. And as well is a comment about the landscape and the destruction of landscape related to the extractivity process of oil in the case of Ecuador now. So I guess this project, project for a portrait, the origin of introduced species, is really the beginning of a series of works that I'm developing now.
Thank you. So then the next presentation by Adriana will guide us a little bit through her process of research and sort of themes of unearthing hidden or discarded or overlooked histories that led to Planisferio Venus, which is the work exhibited here.
Hello. I'm showing here in the exhibition this map that is there. And it's a part of an artwork which name is the Vision Machine. But first, I will say that I'm from Argentina. I grew up in Córdoba. I live in Buenos Aires, but I grew up in Córdoba. It's a city in the middle of the country. And this had to do with my practice, as Córdoba is one of the oldest colonial cities in the region, South America region, Latin America region. And my work has been around colonialism, also modern capitalism, and of course it's a kind of a thread that you can pull. And when you began to search about colonialism, immediately appears the idea and the concept and the invention of racism and the hierarchies on the same space between human beings, and also women as that part, that's minority in of course not in a quantity way, but in the level of quality. And I'm interested in this idea of history, of reviewing history, but this concept of history that is not in a linear way, like objective time, but is in a reticular form, not something that goes up and down, inside, outside, right, left. And so it's the way, I think, to articulate the history, the past, with the present, because it's not linear at all. So I'm interested in searching as well, and because I'm sure, I think that art is produce particularly forms of knowledge, and that's why my practice has to do with the context in where the identities grow. I mean, I think that it's more powerful, although identity is a process. It's a complex process that has to do with experiences, but it's for me it's like more powerful, the tale of that history where that experience will be registered. So when you review the history, when you're able to say something else about this history, that non-fiction history, that means the possibility of change of identities. I mean, when the tale changes, also maybe you're not anymore who you think you've been. And I use drawing, painting, and video, and performance, and sculpture as tools to talk about history, to talk about colonial history in particular. And I also use images from different sources, from different files, and I take them from the original context and put it in association in a new way in order to produce, happily, if it is possible, a new bit of knowledge. And so this part I will read, because it will be easier, it's already wrote in English, where this piece belongs to this future project named Vision Machine. So it's a Vision Machine, it's a multiple part project in constant developing. That means it's all the time is growing. It's something that I began 2 years ago, but all the time it changes, and I named them exercise. Exercise 1, exercise 2, exercise 3. Based on research and extensive collection of images, rearranges and juxtaposes in order to offer critical narratives about system of power. The idea of this series is to pose questions about what we see, how we see it, and how vision has the ability to either reinforce or take apart the narratives which underline systems of oppression. So the idea of this project is to use different systems of vision. I mean, like displays, videos, drawings, paint. This is the exercise 1. This is part of an installation showing was in Chapter by and the whole project has this kind of images, drawing. This is a still in front of a video that I painted, but it's this video is from 2013. It's Danish video that it was designed to teach in schools how terrible was the slave trafficking. And it's completely perverse. I mean, it's one of the parts of the video. You have this kind of Tetris, to say in English, Tetris. They even to put, try to put the more slaves that you can in the bottom of a ship. The whole video is terrible, but it's officially suggested and it has been plain history. It's in name. It has been thinking to teach in schools now. So that's what I'm saying about history. That there's not. We know that there's no developing. I mean, everything is just there, and sometimes appears, and sometimes just it's in silence. But it's we are processed through all the time. That's what I think. Well, and this is an example of that. Then yeah, I make some collage. But I say before, the idea is to maybe that the other, the observer makes its own associations. And yeah, I will go to the map, right to the map. Okay. Well, this is a long map also made by, it's about the words of slave trafficking. I made a river just putting together the coast involved in from Africa, America, and Europe involved in the slave trafficking. And I played with architecture as well. The outro, it's not Paraguay, but it's the figure of the man in South America. Well, I'm going fast because we have well, this has to do with I have a better image. It's well. And this is from schools to teach history, and this idea, Manuel Capelus was there, this idea of the Indian, the origin that it's completely Hollywood, I don't know. And then here we have the exercise or these bidons. And well, this is there are two maps. This is a map that works also in counterpoint, that in opposition of another map. This would be the proposal of a world where it goes and runs around the feminine part of humanity. And I like this idea of talking about feminine part of humanity and not only one about women, as I think that it's like a better and wider concept that goes across the biological gender. And so it's a parallel work, may say, with the world we know how it is, that is our patriarchy world. And formally this is a celestial planisphere. A celestial planisphere is an instrument to use to read the sky from any point of Earth. And it's like two discs that goes around carbon pivot, something like that. So you can point the sky and learn and be able to read the sky. I mean, this is like the modern astrolabe. And the sky I chose to this celestial planisphere is the first hour of the first day of the first month of the year 1 of the Christian area from Jerusalem. And there are some images of most of the images, or some women related to that have been involved and have important roles in the battles and the wars and in the process of independence in Latin America. They are also women that are alive. They are not only historical women, but women that are alive, also some artists as well, writers. And but I choose a part of them, of course, but I choose these ones because they're having like political women in a way, and women that were involved in the fighting for rights of minorities. I mean, with abolitionists and feminists and people, women that was not only fighting for women's rights, but for these minorities. So it's very clear how it's more or less the same, no? It's like if somebody is abolitionist, it's because it's also interested in human rights. It's something that goes together. And in front, well, this is like a proposal of a more organic word, more intuitive word, that in opposite to more rational, more rigid word that would be the patriarchy. And I replaced, if I replace the names of the stars with some concepts around feminism, or some results of my own lectures, or my own interpretation of the lectures, and maybe some little things from words from a film or from a song. I know there's a lot of stuff, but and the idea is that if you read these constellations that goes around one concept, you are able to understand more or less what is going on. That's the idea. Well, I don't know if I have time to say something about the images, but okay. Here, for example, this is like this cycle, this images in the top and in the bottom of the images. Here we have it's a print of Albert Durero from print from 1751. 1751. And he's normally is read as religious images, and it's not. In fact, it's secular, because he made this image in times of when
people from the rural areas were farmers
were expulsed from their own lands by the señores rurales.
like from the lords, like
From the lords, exactly. And so he was like very near to his movements, and he made this was in fact that it was not out of the Eden. And then on the other side we have a detail of Bosco, the garden of delicious delights. One of the delights. And it seems that his iconography is so strange. I mean, even now, had to do that he belongs to a movement like heretic groups and nudist groups. Things that are appearing now that we are, I don't know, reconstructing, reading the history, all the history, reviewing the history in a different way. So here is Natalia Bolcharova, that she's a cubist and contemporary from Picasso. She's a Russian, she was a Russian artist, obviously not very known, but I came with information that the Pompidou has a couple of works in the collection, which is great. And also on the other side is the motorcycles that obviously makes references to something more, I don't know, transitivity and more organic, and our bodies that are in fact connected to other things, and it's not only rationalized stuff, it's I don't know, more organic, yes. And well, sometimes also appear here, I think like a box of first aids of the witches in the Middle Age. But if any woman is catch with this plants in the house, could be fired, yeah. Okay. And the opposite of this map is this map, which is the patriarchy representation. Its family is exactly the same, it's the same sky, but I replace again the names of the stars with other concepts. I think that it's more the one that we know now. There are also some images of violence, real violence, I mean in terms of material violence, but also symbolic violence, Nazism, Inquisition, well, weapons, jails, and okay, for example, here I have the counterpoint with is a Picasso painting. And then, well, so when you saw these images through this red filter, so the red filter just disappeared. It's something like magic. I don't know why.
Thank you. Sorry, we're very sharing time. And I guess this is a very detailed and fine-grained type of work, and we can also get closer and see more in person and close with you. So the last of the evening is Simón Vega, as we were saying before. He is the artist who created our convivial space, the space where we serve coffee, the tradition of Cosmopolis, again, with this idea of conviviality in mind, a workshop of a space that is alive and changes through time, and that also has a station for barter that Christina has been helping with a lot in developing a series of events every Sunday at afternoon at 2 p.m. So we will leave it to Simón now to talk a little bit about his work and sort of how this work has been building on a whole series of research and interests that he developed over the years.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming, and Centre Pompidou for hosting this exhibition. I will speak briefly about my work, and particularly about a series of work that has to do with some issue that has also been talked about by the other artists. My work, I try to have it be multi-layered. I'm very interested in identity, in history, in politics, but also in science fiction and the future. I usually try to combine elements that don't go together or that normally shouldn't go together, that some come from what we call the first world and what we call the third world. For me, this can also be viewed somehow as different planets. And the differences between one and the other are great, but also correspondences are great. And I strive with my work to create these sort of bridges between these things that, they shouldn't go together. I am very interested in El Salvador, how history has shaped our current situation. Our civil wars in the 80s and 90s were very important. Also, we in El Salvador, as different from Guatemala, we are not, we kind of erased our indigenous heritage and population. And I am questioning in my work where we are going, where we come from, but also where we are going. So the past and the future are also shaping today. So in this series called Tropical Space Proyectos, I am interested in mixing elements from, yes, our civil wars and current situation, but how they relate to global events, particularly to the Cold War. So the civil war that we had in El Salvador in the 1980s could be viewed as a local problem, but was actually very much related to the bigger conflict between the Soviet Union and the United States. So I don't want to talk too directly about the war. I don't want to have necessarily guns or people dying in order to speak about this. I also think part of our identity is humor and resilience. So I've been doing for a while this series of capsules about this competition, disguised as a scientific, exploration, but was actually a military battle for supremacy in space. And if you could put a rocket into space, you could also put it in the enemy's country. So I started doing these capsules that are, in this case, the Mercury capsule and from NASA, but I try to build it with materials that come from, methods and materials that come from shantytown and informal architecture. So this work was recently displayed at the Bronx Museum, the Mercury capsule. I like the domestic elements of it, and I also think that there are sharing elements between life in space and life in a shantytown. For example, very limited space, lack of good air, what to do with waste, and then I try to mix this into a new work like this. So I'm usually using these materials that have this double meaning. So for example, I like this corrugated metal that looks, and you can see very poor houses are made of this, but with the light it also looks very futuristic and it kind of gives it speed. I'm doing often a work from the Soviet space program and then another one from NASA to continue this confrontation. In this case, this was the Sputnik capsule. The first that was launched into space, but I did a crash landing at the beach in El Salvador. I live at the coastal area of El Salvador, and then early one morning, this strange capsule landed or appeared as it had landed at the beach in El Sonte, El Salvador. And then I had built it with materials that come from that beach, discarded garbage, and I reutilized them to make this play between a very sophisticated spaceship and done with these materials that speak of poverty, but also of creativity of people doing these kind of things. So this was the Sputnik, was perhaps the first work that I did. And I have done several. This is the Apollo lunar rover that was at the moon, but I like to mix it up with elements from a beach boogie. I also always thought that this looks like a beach boogie, and then I think it's important to sort of make it also our own, make it very colorful and very funny. So this is speaking of also what was left for us in El Salvador. So from the US culture, we got a lot of elements in this boogie, like surfing, and this was an interactive work that you could come, and in the ice boxes there were Coke and Pepsi, Then you could sit on the cart, and it was filled with selfie sticks, so you could take your own pictures. So this image of vanity was also involved. And then there was a sound element, which was a list of songs like Surfing USA, Born in the USA, Summertime, and such, that speaks about this sort of superficial way of thinking that was left for us in El Salvador. Its counterpart in this exhibition I had in Costa Rica was the LK Lunar Module that was developed by the Soviet space program. It was built, but it never went to the moon, obviously. So I did my own version. I think also these philosophies coming from communism, Leninism, and all its different ways landed in these like cornfields in El Salvador. It really has no relation. However, it was very much intertwined to create the communist movement and then the war that spurred from that. But in this case, this is also a social sculpture. I am interested in Joseph Beuys' concept of people coming together and making this element that is a sculpture. So this was also a vodka bar, and it was a self-service vodka bar filled with like super cheap vodka that we have in Central America. It's very funny, they all have these Russian names like Rostov and Nikolai, and Troika. And so you could come and then mix it up with Jamaican tea or chia juice, which are red, therefore communist. So you were serving yourself some vodkas while there was audio of Nikita Khrushchev talking about, the expanse of global communism, of course in Russian, so no one could really understand, but you felt like you were being scolded, by someone while you were getting this free drink. Another project I did, which was the biggest one I've done so far, is based on the Mir station. Mir means world, it also means peace, and in this case I did a version of this space station for the Coachella Music Festival in California. The original one is comprised of 7 modules, but to make it really huge, I made a sculpture made out of around 30 modules, all modeled after the original ones, and then created this sort of global village in which I am thinking of, yes, the past and what was left behind for us, but I am also thinking about the future, and this sort of Noah's Ark syndrome that I get in science fiction movies, where it's like, okay, the world is going to blast, and we need to escape, and where are we going, and it almost seems like it's very fancy to go on one of these, but it should be actually like super crowded and limited, and also makes you think like, who would board that station, who is going to get the privilege to be safe, and also what is going to happen to the people that are left behind. So this work was made out of some recycled materials and others, and important for me to include plants and the sculpture to be alive. So this was part, as I said, of the music festival, Coachella, so also the interaction with the public and the music was important, and light and science and other elements that spoke about life in El Salvador and also life in outer space, if we had a take on it. It had hammocks, it had smoke, and a bunch of things that made it very funny also. I made some drawings based on some of these modules as well, and they are like blueprints. So my idea is that poverty is considered from the very beginning in our conception and the systems that are being dictated by Eurocentric thought. I also make other works that are not related necessarily to history, but science fiction. This other series is based after Star Wars, and this one is the Imperial Star Destroyer. In my case, I made it out of corrugated metal. This was, in this case, all new materials. It's sort of like a big lamp. It's around like a 4-meter long ship that is floating in space, and in which I am talking about this idea of migration and the fear that the first world countries have of the immigrants. So they are viewed as this sort of invasion. So I only work with the Imperial spaceships from Star Wars, therefore the bad guys. And then it's about the perception that they have of us, that we are the bad guys that are invading the neat countries in the north, and then we're filling it up with garbage and very rowdy stuff. In reality, we are also a working force, very necessary for the first world. To speak very briefly and just give it a little bit of context to the work that I created for the Pompidou, I am basing this after markets, street markets, and also the nomad markets known as tianguis, in which people are, carrying all these elements to sell, and therefore creating this sort of islands that people can access. The furniture that is around you is very much inspired by the furniture in the streets of El Salvador and La Libertad, the coastal area where I live. So we are reusing pallets and a lot of these materials in order to create spaces to survive and to be able to sell these wares. Like for example, these carts made out of baby strollers, and I have people use this in order to, they are very functional, they're very smart. People have almost no means to survive, but they're doing this in order to sell water or coffee. So also you can see some of these carts that are here in the installation that are serving Salvadorian coffee. I am mimicking also elements from the Mars rovers from NASA that are currently exploring Mars in order to create these elements, these little carts that look like robots. So I like all these colorful elements like the umbrellas, for example, but I am using them also as satellite dishes in this exhibition. And sound elements and the very functional elements are things that are being inspired in order to create these social sculptures that have a functional use. However, I'm also mixing them with space design and the lunar probes designed by NASA and other space programs. In this exhibition, there is a reading module and there is a barter station that are taking elements from both in order to create these new ways of relating and combining for the future, but also about the present. In my process, I do a lot of drawing. These drawings are sometimes very detailed, and I try to always think sculpturally about them. And for me, really, the design is the important thing, and then we translate it to what is possible within the exhibition space. And eventually, these are evolving in order to become functional elements that have sculptural characteristics. And in this case, I did these renderings, which I almost never do. I'm always very analog. And I'm interested in technology, but moreover in anti-technology. And I think that the elements that are being brought in the streets and all these areas that are being viewed as less are very important to take into consideration when we speak about the future and different possibilities. So the Mars rovers, these carts that are exploring Mars, it's ridiculous that they cost around $42 billion to develop. However, people in the streets of El Salvador, they are making these survival carts almost with nothing. So I am trying to mix these two up in order to have new ideas stemming from the past, but also thinking about the future and the possibility of new utopias. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, everybody. Unfortunately, we're running slightly late on our schedule, so I invite you to stay and ask questions to the artists directly now, and to stay with us in the space. We will have more performances and music coming up right away. So thank you very much. Thank you all.